Hi, everyone, and welcome to She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. My special guest today is the amazing Janine Turner. Janine is an Emmy-nominated actress, a poet, a singer, an author. She is the host of a radio show as well as a terrific podcast. She's an amazing human being. She's also the co-founder of an organization called Constituting America, and she's working to spread the word about the importance of civics education. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about Janine's tremendous faith and overcoming adversity, how that was a very important component of her recovery. And I think it's such an appropriate conversation to have right now. Janine, welcome to She Said, She Said.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Via Zoom. Here we go.
Exactly. Well, I've been such a big fan for such a long, long time. And while I knew you originally as an actress, not personally, but knew of you, but now I admire you even more because of all the amazing things that you're doing to make the world a better place. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your wonderful show. It's just terrific. And it's my honor, especially with a fellow Texan.
Hook 'em, exactly. So Janine is joining us from her ranch in Texas, in Colleyville, Texas. And we're really delighted to have her here via Zoom. We'll be providing this content both on the She Said, She Said podcast platform, as well as on our new YouTube channel. So it's very exciting. Janine, I thought a great place to start this conversation. You are involved in so many amazing activities, but because of this moment in time right now, and so many people are hurting and facing real adversity, you have faced real adversity and talked very publicly about your experience, largely with addiction. And I thought this would be a great place to start this conversation to get your thoughts on things that have been helpful to you as you have made this journey. You've been sober for 34 years?
33, it'll be 34 on May 28th.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Well, as I was joking with you earlier, I claim it now. I just say, yes, it is.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if congratulations is the right word, but it's an amazing accomplishment.
Well, I find that, I'm 57 and I'll be 58 in December, and I have 33 years, 34 in a couple months. And it's interesting because going through midlife is almost as equally sobriety has a whole new chapter to it, just as it did when I first got sober. So it's not like I ever think, and I never did drugs, but alcoholism is one of these cyclical, familial, genetic issues in my family. I mean, I can go all the way back to my great-great-great-grandpa, who was writing letters to his sons. Back in the 1840s, saying, "Boys, stay away from John Barleycorn." He wrote this entire letter and about his withdrawal from it, and how he would see snakes and raccoons on his bed, and the pictures in the painting would change color, become morphed, and people with white coats were waiting. So, it was interesting that he would even say that to his sons. So it goes way, way back. And I got sober very early at age 23, with lots of, it's a long story, but I'll tell you one story. I was engaged to be married to Alec Baldwin, which I just always say because people think that's fun. I knew him when he was just off a soap opera. I don't even know which one it was. And I was on General Hospital. He had his own problem with addictions, which is his story to tell, but he started going to a 12-step program. And I had the invitations, I had the dress. We were a month out from the wedding, but alarm bells were going off my head, which I always believe comes from God, where I was thinking, this is not healthy, what's happening here. This is cyclical. This is not right. And he was dealing with his own addiction. I was drinking at the time. But he started a 12-step program. And so then I started going to a 12-step program, which is more Al-Anon based. It was, it's called Coke-Anon because it was about cocaine. I don't even think that exists anymore, but at the time it did. Hollywood, in the 80s. And I a couple of years later, I got sober. So I can look at that breakup when we decided not to get married, and how tormenting that was for me, and how devastating. I mean, when you're in love, and he was my first love, and we were engaged, and we had the wedding dress and everything, and then that's torn apart. I wept for a couple of years over Linda Ronstadt's Gershwin album. But then I found sobriety. And so now I can look back at that and say, through that devastation, I found sobriety. So I always think life is like that. Through every dark valley, truly, just like David's Psalm says, God is with us. If we stay connected, I think, and I've been through many black holes in my life. And sometimes I deal with, everyone gets overwhelmed sometimes, right? So I think that it's going through those black holes, knowing that God is with me, and that staying true, knowing that the drink is not the answer, because if I were to drink, it would be even worse. It wouldn't solve any problems. And I know that and believe that. And also that if I were to drink, I wouldn't just pick up 34 years later and have one. I'd be right where I left off. And so I know that it's ingrained within me that that's just not the answer, but God is the answer. Yeah. And that's what's so amazing about, a 12-step program, is how it's just based on God, and God is the only cure, which is amazing. What other disease do we have out there? And I firmly believe that alcoholism is genetic and cyclical. And I broke the cycle, which is great. For my daughter now does not drink, and I taught her never to drink since the age of 2. And I explained why to her. It's the only disease where God cures it. Well, God can cure any disease, okay? Obviously, there are miracles with health all the time, but I'm saying there's no antibiotic, there's no pill to take with overcoming alcoholism, and in some others cases addiction. But it's focusing on God, and the principles are so humbling, because it's okay. I am powerless. I'm powerless over this, which we can imbue anything we want to over that, whether it's the pandemic or having to be in our homes, or a situation with a loved one, or you fill in your own blank, right? But I am powerless over this. I give it to God. And then there's this whole process where I'm like, okay, what is my responsibility in this? What are my character defects? What am I holding on to that's a resentment? Let me get all this, because you can't keep all that. You can't keep it in your vessel. You can't keep it in your mind. So you go through that process of just writing it out, talking to somebody you trust about it. And then it's a continual inventory every day. At the end of the day, I, humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings, first of all. So, okay, I'll give you these shortcomings. And then it's every day I continue to take my inventory every day. And when I'm wrong, promptly admitting it. So there's just this sense of, it's spiritual enlightenment is what it leads to. And then it's sharing the message, continuing to share the message with someone else. That's all really kind of, I think, based on Christian principles, but they don't say that in AA because people come from different walks of life and different religions. But, there's, through the darkness, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, as long as I remain, sometimes God has to carry us, but if I remain focused on God and stay sober, and get through it.
It's amazing. It's truly amazing. Talk a little bit about how you apply those principles and that mindset to the world that we find ourselves in at this moment in time. People are freaked out, rightly so. This is a very scary time. What's your advice for how is the best way? I mean, in some respects, people may have gotten away from their faith, or maybe they're not people of faith at all. What's your advice for people like that who may be truly lost in this environment?
Well, I think the first thing is that this too shall pass. This will pass. I keep telling my daughter, who's a senior in college and is now going to miss her graduation ceremony and the cap and gown and the whole 9 yards, and everything was just abruptly stopped. And then it's so fearful with what's happening, these numbers. It's a press conference from yesterday, and it's so incredibly sobering. And but this too shall pass, I think, is just to know that it's not forever. I think we can gather a lot of courage from what all of our forefathers and mothers and heritage have gone through. And they, we come from a stock of, some of us were born here if we're Native American, and that's an incredible heritage. And the rest of us came over on boats and ships and are on the covered wagons across the trail. We're a tough, true grit type of people. And I also think that remaining hopeful in the process, for me, it would be not picking up a drink. I think if people are drinking and drugging right now, that may get really, really really tricky. But also for me, that's what it would be. And then staying rooted in faith. I mean, I do my God on the goes minutes every day. I make sure the first thing I do in the morning is I do not look at the news. I actually either open the Bible or open my app and I read the Bible first, and then if I want to look at the news, I look at the news, and then I go out and take a walk. Or, and then if I look at the news again, I go back to faith. I always try to keep it in prayer and faith. And also something that I do that really helps me, because, there are people out there that I deal with situational depression sometimes where I just get overwhelmed, and I can't go drink, and I have all these feelings and I don't know what to do with them. The first thing is call somebody, pray, call somebody. But the other thing is I just start saying the Lord's Prayer over and over in my head. And that really, really helps me. And I do these God on the goes. And there was one that I did a couple of days ago. You want me to share the scripture with you and the imagery that I did with that?
I do. But before you do that, I want you to talk about what God on the go is, because we haven't had a chance to actually talk about that. So what is God on the go?
Well, it's really funny because my father was Episcopalian and my mother Baptist. So they had completely different backgrounds in faith, and they argued so much about where to go to church that somehow, though, I was raised with a Christian upbringing, But my great grandmother on my mother's side was the pillar of the Baptist church. And so it was just ingrained within me. And then when I was 15, I was baptized again at Saginaw Baptist, a little town outside of Fort Worth. But to me, faith is like a stair step. There's always, an enlightenment, various stages of enlightenment. And so my faith has been pivotal to me. I would say when I realized I was going to be raising my daughter by myself, that her father just walked, that my faith deepened even more. And I realized, I made a vow to God to be his, and that he would just get us through, not get us through because it's just been a joy with my daughter, but that, we were going to be without him. And so now God became my so-called husband and her father. And so my faith deepened even, I think the more we need God, the deeper our faith becomes. And then it escalated again, I suppose, when 9/11 happened. I found it to be very, very scary. And I started a Bible study, and a friend handed me a life application study Bible. And that really opened it up, because before then I really sort of had King James, So I read the Bible in a year, and that was, I guess, 2002. And after that, the Bible was just pivotal in raising my daughter. We, read the Bible every day. We read daily devotions every day. And some of the people I know in sobriety is like, man, I have to read like 6 devotionals just to get my morning going, and then I gotta do it again. But my faith, and especially reading the Bible, has just been imperative. My daughter and I have always read the Bible together and opened it up. So I used to send it out. I used to type it out every morning when I read it. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, why don't I just record it? Because I had a radio show myself for 2.5 years. Right. And now with these apps, it's just so easy. So it's called the God on the Go Minute. And now I'm reading the Bible in a year again. So I think the first year, 2 years, I was just kind of going wherever, maybe going through a certain book, but now I'm reading the Bible in a year. But so I've kind of started up with the God that goes mid-cycle here. But I'll read the Bible in the morning, and then whatever of my daily readings, because it's in a year, so it's Old Testament, New Testament, Proverbs, Psalms. Whatever I feel that God is saying to me, I will underline, and then I just hit record, and I say, okay, God, just speak through me. Now, I think in the past 2 months, I'm actually doing a little bit longer than a minute. So it's a little bit more conversational now. So you can hear a little more laughter, a little more, I'll read it again. I'll sort of stream of consciousness. It's maybe about 3 to 5 minutes now, but I just do it every morning. And then I send it out, and it goes on social media. If anyone wants to follow, you can get it via text or via email, or it's on my social media, my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and it's all Janine Turner.
Yeah.
J-A-N-I.
I think you can download it on iTunes or anywhere that you get your podcast as well, right?
It's on all that, Yeah. But that's what I do. I just record it every morning. And I find that lately they've been a lot about the pandemic and how to cope with that.
Yeah, no, they're terrific. And, again, everybody, people listening will have different points of view about all of this, but I think there's great comfort in understanding that you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. And you really do a nice job of encapsulating that. It's done in a very beautiful way. So I encourage folks to check that out, especially right now. I think it can be very powerful.
Well, everyone has different faiths. And so I just share it, and whoever wants to listen. We have this saying in the 12-step program that says, take what you like and leave the rest.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to listen to it. But there was this great quote in Romans 11:36, for from him and through him and to him are all things. And I love that. I think that's become my new sort of motto, is that everything I do in my life, I try to be from him, or any gifts I have, any talents I have, any impulse of love or anything of that's godly is from him. I need to do all that. I need to enact and execute all that through him, and then give the glory back to him because it's for him. So it's like this cyclical circle, from him, through him, for him. So lately that's been something I just love, because it also is a sense of humility. You never say, oh my God, didn't I write a great thing, or didn't I do this? I always try to give it back to God, because, but that does not mean, I'm not Pollyanna either. It doesn't mean I think I'm to this level of faith and sobriety because of the darkness that I've walked through, because of what I've gone through in my life, and all these valleys that I go through, and I have to climb out of them. And so I think that that's what makes it more dire for me to stay rooted in something like this. And I think for people that are alone at home, there was this other one that I did the other day. It's Psalms, and I will stop this, but Psalms 94:22. Like my roots, we all have roots now because we can't go to our hair. I'm bending over, very conscientious of my 2-inch roots. When I was on a Zoom the other day, and all the blondes had roots. I'm like, okay,
this is nothing compared to what it's going to look like 30 days from now.
Oh God, 2 months? I don't know what I'm going to do. Psalm 4:22, but the Lord has become my stronghold and my God, the rock of my refuge. And so in the God on the Go that I did a couple of days ago, I talked about that, the stronghold. Think of it as, in Texas, because you're a Texan, when there's a tornado coming, we're supposed to go into the bathtub and hold on to the plumbing, because the plumbing is down into the ground. So I thought of the stronghold of God being the stronghold as like a pole that's in the earth that goes all the way up to heaven, and it's rooted in its God. And so we hold on to that. So I think whenever we feel anxiety, a lot of times people feel anxiety and they feel free floating, some people may really be cooped up in really dangerous situations, with addicts and alcoholics. And those can be very dangerous situations for people. And just to hold on to that pole, that stronghold. And when my daughter listened to it, she liked the rock as my refuge, because we can think of a rock that's sturdy, or a cave that we're in that encompasses us and protects us. So, I think things like that may help people get through it. And as far as when people are having to deal with the death of the situation, the one I did today, I believe, is on timelessness, and about how there is no time with God, and God is eternal. And I lost my father in 2014, and talk about another big challenge. I was very close with my father, and I didn't get to say goodbye. And all these people now that are having to say goodbye to their loved ones, or they can't, or they're doing it by walkie-talkie. It's just so incredibly devastating. So for the people who lost someone, what do you say about that? Except that I lost my father, and it took me about a year, to kind of grapple with it. But I think that it's, in regard to that, it's just the eternal aspect of life, that there is an eternity. And I certainly felt my father greatly after he passed. And so I think that there's, as Christians especially, we can rest in that there's life after death, there's eternal quality. A lot of religions believe that. I think that in some level. So I think that the eternal timelessness is what we can hold on to in times like that.
Absolutely. So you use your talents, many, many talents, in all of these incredible ways. And the other way I really want to talk about today is with an organization called Constituting America that you co-founded along with my friend Kathy Gillespie, who was our guest on episode 40, I believe, of She Said podcast back a couple of years ago when we first started. But talk a little bit about Constituting America. What is it? What are you trying to accomplish? And where this idea, ultimately came from? How did you have this amazing idea?
I think it started, and this is the power of education and what teachers can do. So I also believe, supposedly I'm related to George Washington through his grandfather, which is super cool.
Wow.
His grandfather, we share the same, ancestors through his grandfather, which is, oh wow, that's super cool. But I've always, when I was in third grade, my father was a West Pointer. He was from Athens, Texas, but attended West Point Military Academy, graduated back in 57, class of 57, you could do Air Force Army. So he's one of the first to fly twice the speed of sound in the 1960s. And but I remember looking at my father saying, Dad, if our founding fathers were to come back today, what would they be most disappointed about? What third grader asked that question, right? And my father thought about it. And, this is one of these things that's just so, you know what he said? It's just crazy too that I remember this moment.
What did he say?
He said, taxes. My dad was a man of few words, right? It's like a fish that opens his mouth gets caught. Anyway, then my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Ingram, I was in a small school in Fort Worth. In the pasture were cows roaming around. I loved this school. My fifth grade was my first year in the school, and it was his first year as a teacher. And so he spent the entire year prepping us and rehearsing with us the play, the musical 1776.
Wow.
And if you haven't seen it, I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah.
Make sure you watch it with your family on July 4th. It's a wonderful musical from the 70s. They did it around the bicentennial era. And John Adams, and it brings all the founding fathers to life in a musical. And I played Thomas Jefferson's wife, and so Martha, and I sang a little song. And so that really is a wonderful way to connect the arts with history, and it had a lasting impact. And then I guess around 2009, I just had this. I believe all these things come from God. It's a little tap on the shoulder. And I love our country, and I believe in our founding fathers' genius and our founding documents and the lack of knowledge. And I just picked up the phone and called Kathy Gillespie and said, we need to start a foundation, about the Constitution. And I remember I was in the grocery store with my daughter getting, I had a can of beans in my hand or something. And, God bless Kathy Gillespie, because we did it. And within the first 3 months, we had launched a 90-day study for adults to learn about the documents, breaking it down line by line. We had a contest that we launched with the arts, poetry, artwork, short film, songs, PSA, all this. We went on a 5,000 to 6,500 mile road trip in a dilapidated trailer, whatever, RV that with the refrigerator door kept falling off. And we went to every state from California, zigzagging around up to New York to interview these winners and we had a documentary in the schools by September 17th, which is Constitution Day. So it's just been a ride since then, 10 years. And what I say about Kathy Gillespie is, an eagle, it takes a left wing and a right wing to fly. And I always joke that I have all these ideas, and without Kathy, I would just be flapping my wing, and I wouldn't be able to fly. She's the great administrator and brings these, I call it with all these ideas, and it just wouldn't be happening without Kathy. So we're a great team. We're best friends. We're like soul sisters, and it's been a wild ride. But when we get together with these kids, these winners, and now we're doing Zooms. This is coming out of, I used to give speeches, I still will, but I give speeches into schools. But now with Zoom, we're just inviting people all over the country to come join. And on Mondays, I'm teaching what I teach the kids about empowering them. The Constitution empowers them, which we can get to in a minute, which I really would love to talk about. But then now I'm bringing the kids in. And they're talking, two of our ambassadors, the National Youth Director and one of our ambassadors, are 16 years old. And we had a wonderful Zoom on Saturday where our winners came back from 8 years ago, 10 years ago. See, they're still on our youth board. They're still with us. And all these kids are talking about, how they won the contest and how it's changed their lives and how they're still with us. So now I'm bringing the kids in, students, to actually be a part of this. And yesterday we talked about the pandemic and the Constitution. Every Monday, I'm actually going to give the quiz, which talks about the Constitution, how it empowers you. And then Saturday nights now, we're going to be doing something fun. We're going to mirror our 90-day study that's happening right now. So we're going to talk about the Morse code and how important that was in America. And then now we're bringing the kids in so they can ask questions too. And anyone who worries about the millennials or the Z generation, they can join us and just see these two students that come in. They'll be greatly encouraged.
Yeah. So the ultimate goal, though, is to educate the population about the Constitution and the founding fathers and the founding principles, ultimately, right? Why was this something that so struck you, that the need was there? Obviously, the need is there, but what was it? Like you mentioned God tapping you on the shoulder, but was there a moment or an experience or something that you saw that really was like, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this.
What the Constitution does is it protects our rights and that we're born with. And I think that what happens is in the classroom today, they are so overwhelmed with TOS tests and things they have to teach them that they don't have time, or they're up against this sort of political factor where they feel that it's not hip and cool. They're swimming upstream. The Constitution is something a lot of people think limits them and they don't like it anymore. And actually what I very firmly believe is that they gave us this foundation. And I always tell the kids, it's like building a house, you know, the foundation's the concrete. And they gave us this concrete with these amazing limits to power. And I'll walk all through this with them, legislative, executive, and judicial. And that with the amendment process, they gave us the ability to build the house, you know. And so with the amendments, we put up the wood and the windows and the roof. And so there is a window where we can change what we don't like, but we don't have to throw the entire thing away. And also, I think that if the teachers teach because of time, if they teach it all by rote, or they teach them it's not any good anymore. I mean, law schools, they just crucify it. You know, they just say it's this old thing. And, you know, but actually it empowers people. And that's what I teach these kids, whether they're 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. You know, I've given over 400 of these speeches now. I say, I'm going to empower you. The government isn't something that just happens up there in Washington, D.C. It's something that you can do right now. And I talk about the tools in their toolbox, which is the First Amendment. And so I said, instead of running to the street going, and people interviewing, why are you here? I don't know, everybody else is here, yeah. And I teach them to start with a petition. And I actually have the kids ask them what they want to change in their neighborhood. And, you know, it's really interesting. Kids will say, too many potholes. It's too dark. They shouldn't be smoking pot on the street. We need a swimming pool. There's too much violence. They're stealing out of our cars. And, you know, it's a lot of these kids that are in these type of areas who feel so hopeless. And a lot of, but even people today that are in other kinds of neighborhoods think that they're just one person and the government's so big. So what I do is empower them you write that petition. So I'll say, what do you want to change? Then to use their speech to talk about it, then to call the press to get more info about it, then to plan their assembly so they're orderly. It's not mob passion. It's because we're a nation of laws. And then I teach them how to call their representative in their area, that they can't even get to the president. And in closing, I also teach them that everyone wants to vote for the president every 4 years, male, female, Democrat, whatever. But the president, he or she is not this powerful figure, and yet millions show up for that, but they don't show up for the representatives every 2 years. And that's the person they can actually talk to that's there for them. So that teaches them about government being right there in their neighborhood. It's just a fantastic thing. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And you have such tremendous creativity in terms of the types of ways in which you're engaging these kids. So there's songs and poetry, which I know is a big love, has historically been a big love of yours. And it's also National Poetry Month this month, I think, starting today. Did you know that? Yeah. Poetry and song, and they act them out and they do PSAs, and there's all these interesting things that you're clearly bringing this creativity that you have assembled over your lifetime because you've been engaged in the creative arts in all these different ways. I think is so magical. It's such an interesting way of presenting subject matter that I think sometimes kids say, oh, well, that's boring. It's not. It's the opposite of boring, and it's so incredibly important.
And we've opened it to STEM too. So they create apps for us or polls, or they do things of that nature. But one of the things that we do that no one else does is when we take them on these trips, which because we know Kathy Gillespie, they're having private tours of the White House. And I did get them into the State Department this year, private tour of the State Department. But Kathy got them into the Supreme Court, and she got Chief Justice John Roberts to come in and speak to them for 50 minutes. Okay. So they have this amazing trip. But we bring in mentors in their actual field, whether they love the singing or directing or whatever it might be. We bring in Gary Sinise or Vince Gill or, major producers of all the Chronicles of Narnia. And we bring them in to mentor them. And they all talked about this last Saturday, is how it's really helped propel their careers as well, because we want them to be thinking about the Constitution as they get older and go into their careers, to pivot it, to take that with them, because it's really through the culture where you're going to affect people, and so that's one of the things. But we hire companies to promote their works. So we hire a music entity out of Nashville, And their songs, whether they're rap, pop, country, have been on the radio millions and millions of times. And then their PSAs, we hire a company to get them on the TV, the televisions, and they've been on millions and millions of times over hundreds and hundreds of television stations. So you're seeing the kids, not Madison Avenue, we didn't hire, the kids are doing it and their works are being promoted. So it encourages them on a professional level, but then also on a level of the Constitution. We put the two together.
It's amazing. It's really amazing. You mentioned this notion of taking these concepts with them. They learn them, they take them with them, across their life. When you think about this notion of impact, and because this is She Said podcast, and we're talking about women with women, about issues that affect us as women, political engagement, civic engagement is a big, big issue. Right now in the US Congress, we have, I believe, 23, almost 24% is made up of women, but that's a far cry from the 50% of the population that we make up. How much of this do you see as potentially having an impact on things like that, on engagement by, women and men, but particularly women?
Well, we have some amazing young women that have won this contest that I feel certain one of them will rule the world someday, if not the United States. I think that it's a continuation. I've written a book about strong, courageous women throughout history called Holding Her Head High. It was published by Thomas Nelson, and it's available on Amazon and whatnot. I've written a Broadway play over one of them. It's just slow and steady. We keep growing and infiltrating ourselves into the community as leaders. It's been a slow process. I mean, oh my gosh, Hollywood, what it was like when I started in 1980 in Hollywood, you want to talk? And it's still hard. I mean, if two young men walk in and say, hey, I've written a screenplay and I want to direct it, they'll go, yeah. If I walk in, even, a couple of years ago, I've been trying to get this movie produced. It was all women. We were sitting around the table and I'm like, well, who's the man? And they felt very secure there wasn't a man involved, So I still think it's very different for women. But I think it's changing. We're starting to see we need more women to represent us, most definitely in Congress, in the judicial branches, and as president someday. And I think it's slowly happening. I think it's a little difficult for women though with children. I think that's the trick. But women are still feel the pull to, we have our careers and whatnot, but we really want to raise our children, and to be a congresswoman or a senator takes infinite amounts of time. So I think that's why we see women who are a little further along in their journey of life when they finally have the kids or go out and do that type of thing.
So if you had to articulate what you hope the biggest impact will be from Constituting America, what would that be?
When I'm finished a lot of the time, because it's a 45-minute, hour and a half, and it's really Socratic. I let them talk. I ask them questions. We have communication. My hope is that they realize that the Constitution, because of the checks and balances, that they need to know those, so that they know with these representatives that swear to protect it, because it protects us, that they don't know what's in it, they won't know if they're being told the truth. It's very important that they know. But it's those checks and balances that preserve those rights that are the tools in their toolbox. And I think the one thing I want them to feel is they matter, and they have power in this country, and they have a choice. Do I sit? I joke about the lazy boy chair, that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we kind of walk through that. And I said, I have a lazy boy chair right there, and I get in it and I don't want to get out of it. And so are we going to stay in the lazy boy chair and say, yeah, I won't make a difference, or I can't, who am I? I want them to feel they matter, they're empowered, and the Constitution, and even the Declaration declares that, through our Creator, we are born with these rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Abraham Lincoln said that was the golden apple right there, and the Constitution just protects that. So my hope is they realize that they're important, that the government isn't so big that they still can't create a movement to start to change something. It still is we the people, if we know how to utilize it and work it. And I think most kids aren't learning that. They're learning, checks and balances and the three branches of government, check, moving on to the next subject. They don't realize that what's going on up there is they're not supposed to just be conspiring. They're supposed to be doing what people in their own neighborhoods want, or what they want. That they hire them with their vote, they fire them with their vote, and they pay for them with their salary. So I hope they feel empowered and realize that they matter, and they learn that the Constitution empowers them. It doesn't limit them, because everyone thinks this new mantra that the Constitution limits them. It limits government, but it empowers them. And what happens is, many times after I finish, kids will say, one time we didn't have enough sunglasses as prizes, and one kid said, I'm going to do what Ms. Turner said and write a petition,
That's great.
And then that happened in another class. They were talking about some heavy topic, and then the next day they said, well, I'm going to do what Ms. Turner says and write a petition. So that's what I hope. And then they'll teach it to their friends, and they'll teach it to their children, and we keep it very nonpartisan, completely nonpartisan, because it didn't exist when the Constitution was written. George Washington felt the party system could be the demise of America, because people will care more about their party than about being an American. And we have our passions. We don't have to give those up. But I talk with the kids about finding the 5% where they can start a conversation with someone by just finding where they agree on that 5%, that's what America's all about. We come from all these different cultures all over the world. We started, we talked about earlier, we have Native Americans here, then we migrated for all over. So why do we expect everybody to think the same? But we're in this stage of mind where if you don't think exactly the way I think, then you're just wrong. And you need to think the way I think. But if we're from all these different countries and cultures, why do we think that? But the great thing about America is the common ground that we're able to find for the better purpose, which is, I think, what we're doing right now to come full circle with this pandemic. I think people are putting a lid on the politics. They're wanting to say things, but they're really not. They're realizing that it's about love and hope and coming together. And that's truly the great American spirit right there.
Yeah, you're doing so much to make the world a better place, and to help people understand better about the founding and why these principles are so important. So I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, we ask everyone who comes on She Said, for a single piece of advice, or maybe it's a life hack or a mantra, something that you tell yourself. If you had to boil it down to one thing that's kind of your North Star, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. Well, first would be this plaque. Hang on, I'll show you. This was from my great-grandmother, who was the pillar of the Baptist church. See it? It's actually broken so many times. And I would go to her house, and she would say, everybody take something, take something. And this is a yellow rose of Texas, because she was in Texas. But it says, Jesus said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So, that God is always with us. Also, I can't remember exactly where the scripture comes from, but essentially, I think God says, my purpose will be fulfilled through you. And so my daughter and I would always pray and say, God, I hope that we accomplish your purpose and succeed in the things for which you've sent us. So I would say that I fail at this every day, but I just pick myself back up and try not to beat myself up for it and keep trying. And saying, okay, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And may I accomplish the purpose of why God sent me? And to try to keep that communication open so I can hear what he's trying to tell me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Janine, thank you so much. I really appreciate
for
it.
what you're doing. Thank you for your show. Good for you.
Thank you.
She said. That's wonderful.
Oh, this has been so great. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank God for modern communication.
I know. Right? All right. To learn more about Janine Turner, check out the show notes for this episode 95. I'll include links to Constituting America, as well as to Janine's terrific podcast, God on the Go. As always, folks, thanks so much for listening and for being part of this growing and vibrant She Said community. I really appreciate it. I love hearing from you and hope you'll continue to send your feedback and your thoughts. Until then, be safe and be well and take good care of yourself.